The story starts inside a massive courtroom. The head judge announces that based on everything they've discussed, the court is officially labeling Viola Viklund as a witch. Everyone watches as the verdict is handed down, while people in the crowd look on with mixed feelings. The speaker continues, saying that once they've finished completely sealing off her magic, Viola is to be kicked out of the country forever. She takes the news with a quiet, empty look on her face, but soon the guards lose their patience. One of them yells at her to start moving, and Viola grunts in pain as she's dragged along by a heavy chain. The guard gets annoyed, telling her she's just holding up the execution, which makes him pull even harder on her cuffs. He barks at her to get up right now, calling her a witch while she just stares back with cold eyes. It's a huge fall for her, considering she's only 19. Before all this happened, Viola was the oldest daughter of the famous Viklund family. She was actually the vice commander of the elite mages who protected the king, meaning her family was basically the king's right hand. It was one of the most respected names in the land, but now it's all gone. It all started in the magic kingdom of Nemes, at a house known for turning out top-tier mages for ages. Viola's father tells her that starting today, she's officially a court mage. Reed Viklund, the duke himself, warns his daughter to keep working hard and not let the status get to her head. Viola smiles and promises to give her heart and soul to the kingdom, and she meant it. She grew up carrying the weight of being the oldest daughter, studying every subject possible since she was a little kid. Even through her academy years, she stayed at the top of her class, and right after graduating, she got the call to serve the king directly. In a place where magic is everything, being a court mage was the ultimate dream. Roy pats Viola on the head and tells her she's so good she could be the head mage in no time, which makes her blush as she promises to do her absolute best. Everything was going great back then. She had a life and a job that actually felt meaningful, standing on the front lines and leading a team of subordinates she could actually count on. But things took a turn during a mission out in the woods. The group gets cornered by dark energy, and one of the guys panics, wondering where their backup is. The situation gets intense fast, and someone yells for everyone to cover their ears. Roy looks pretty stressed as he warns them that it's about to get really loud. As the dust settles, Viola rushes over to him, shouting his name and asking if he's okay. Roy says he's fine, but the others are just standing there, stunned by the insane amount of power they just saw, and Viola just stares at the scene, totally speechless about what just happened. When they first met, a guy started to speak, but Viola cut in to formally introduce herself as Viola Viklund from the 1st Division. Roy smiled and told her he'd heard the rumors about her family, and he was already pretty impressed by everything he'd heard she could do. He went on about how she was known for being an amazing mage, which just made her act modest and say she still had a long way to go. Roy then asked if she'd be willing to escort him, admitting he'd feel way better having someone with her skills right by his side, and she agreed right away. Those were the best days of her life, back when Roy was just their kind captain before he became king. But those happy memories hit a wall in the present, as the vibe in the room turns cold and Roy says he's asking one more time. He stares down a subordinate and asks if it's true that he tried to assassinate the king because Viola ordered him to do it. And the guy doesn't even hesitate, just looking down and saying that's exactly what happened, while Viola watches from the back in total disbelief. She tries to stop him, begging Roy to wait because the whole thing is crazy, but he just tells her to shut up and calls her Vivi. He snaps his fingers to force the room into silence. A spell hits her instantly, leaving her completely unable to defend herself. One of the soldiers shows up holding a bag. He tells everyone they finally found that magic tool the captain was talking about. Roy looks Viola right in the eyes and says it's a real shame, catching himself before calling her Vivi and using her full title, Vice Commander Viola. He doesn't waste any time, announcing that he's casting a forbidden spell called Body Regression, and he explains that it basically turns back the clock on a person's body by decades. A move usually saved for the worst criminals, so Viola asks why a spell like that is even forbidden, but the mage beside Roy just starts chanting the strange magic words. Roy tells her the danger is that nobody knows how far the de-aging will actually go. Meanwhile, the chanting gets louder, and he mentions the last guy they used this on turned into a fetus and died right there. However, things go differently this time. Roy looks over at the subordinate who confessed and casually tells the guy he looks like he's about 56 years old now, which makes him call the guy a lucky bastard for even surviving the process. Viola just stands there in cuffs, looking completely drained. Roy orders the guards to carve magic seals into the man's limbs, saying they'll finally kick Viola out of the kingdom once that's finished. Everything comes down to this, the punishment of exile. Viola just stands there in her shackles, looking completely worn out as the mages prepare the ritual. Being cast out alone is the harshest thing they can do to a person besides execution, and truth is, nobody even knows if the people they banish manage to survive or if they just end up dying like dogs somewhere, especially since the world outside the city walls is crawling with monsters and beasts. It's a total death trap out there, so it's not hard to guess what happens to a person thrown out with nothing but the clothes on their back. Back at the circle, one of the mages announces that the first 3 magic circles are fully active, and they're moving straight into the execution sequence. Meanwhile, Viola realizes this is a massive long-distance teleportation spell fueled by dozens of mages. She can only wonder where they've set the coordinates to, but then she catches a look at Roy's face. He's got this dark, smug expression that makes her realize something much worse is going on. Suddenly, the magic starts to flare up and someone calls out to Roy as the future king. Everything begins to blur into a blinding white light. While in another place, someone is busy studying a notebook, going over how to declare the spell and where the magic formulas need to be placed. Viola is hanging out in the library when Roy suddenly calls out her nickname. She jumps a bit and quickly answers him, clearly caught off guard as the clock tower outside shows it's getting late. Roy mentions it's almost time to swap shifts, and Viola realizes she totally lost track of time while surrounded by all these magic books and crystals. Roy notices the mess and asks if she's been pulling another all-nighter for her research, so she just stands there looking a bit guilty before admitting that he's right. He doesn't seem mad though because he suddenly tosses a soft pillow right at her. She lets out a little yell as she catches it, completely surprised by the gesture while Roy starts heading for the door. She calls out his name, but he just mentions he actually got there a bit early for the shift change anyway. Then he gives her a friendly wave and a smile. He tells her to make sure she actually gets some sleep before he has to come back and check on her again, leaving Viola standing there hugging the pillow. She thanks him and thinks to herself about what a genuinely nice guy he is, but then the memory shifts and the vibe completely changes. Roy is standing there looking annoyed while holding some of her papers, calling her work totally ridiculous. Viola can't believe the shift in his attitude as she looks at him in shock. He keeps going, complaining about her trying to bring these old, useless techniques into his mage unit like they actually matter. Roy looks down at her with total disgust and calls her a fool, looking like he doesn't even recognize her. He tells her to clean up that trash, pointing at the papers she spent all that time on. Viola quietly says okay while a magic circle starts glowing under her feet, and the system announces the charge is totally finished. It says it's ready for activation, so Roy just gives the order to fire it off. Viola looks down, thinking about how kind he used to be before he suddenly turned into a different person. She's sure there has to be a real reason for this change, and she vows to get to the bottom of what's happening. But then the light clears and she realizes she's floating over some snowy mountain. She loses it and screams as she starts falling straight down. Viola's panicking as she falls, thinking how easy this would be if her magic wasn't sealed. But she's heading straight for the ground and knows she's dead if she doesn't do something. She's not ready to give up yet and screams that there's no way she's dying here. She tries to catch herself as she hits the slope, shouting one last time before she finally stops, groaning in pain because that landing definitely left a mark. She pulls herself together and clenches her fist, thinking she still has a chance. Viola figures if she can't use her voice or mana normally, she'll just force it out, meaning if regular magic is off the table, she'll use something else entirely. She remembers how even as a vice commander, her family and coworkers hated her research, but now it turns out all that work is actually going to save her life out here. Viola's panicking as the ground gets closer, telling herself to hurry up and just activate it. She reaches out and casts a wind wall to break her fall, but even with that, she knows she needs to use levitation next, though she realizes there's no way she'll have enough time. Her only option left is sorcery. Even though everyone back home looks down on it, she clenches her fists, thinking she can make this work as long as she has mana to burn. With a look of total focus, she pushes herself to finish the spell before she hits, casting a slow spell to soften the landing, praying it's enough to keep her from getting crushed. She slams into the dirt and starts coughing, her hands all scratched up and her shackles broken. Catching her breath, Viola looks down at herself and says out loud that she's actually alive. But then she stops. She can hear herself talk again and wonders if the silence spell finally wore off. Viola stands alone in the middle of a thick forest, looking around and realizing she has no idea where she ended up. She's still struggling and hurt from the fall, but she tells herself she refuses to die in a place like this. With a look of pure determination in her eyes, she starts thinking about the people behind the incident and tells herself she has to survive no matter what. Because she's the only one who can find out the truth later, she opens her eyes in a strange room, hearing a voice say thank goodness she's finally awake. A maid asks if she's in any pain, and as Viola tries to speak, the girl introduces herself as Ira. Ira gives her a warm smile and tells her to relax because she's safe now, but then she asks if Viola ran away from somewhere, making Viola freeze up since she doesn't have an answer. Just then, a knight in white armor peeks through the curtain and asks Ira how the girl is doing, so Ira tells him she just woke up a second ago, while Viola just lies there trying to figure out who these people are. The knight looks down at Viola and mentions that while he doesn't know the whole story, he doesn't think she's a threat, but he still warns Ira to stay on guard since it could be a trap using a kid, telling her to keep a close watch just in case. Ira just smiles and tells Viola she can relax because the guy is actually really kind, even if she secretly thinks neither of them look dangerous. Outside, the wagon sits quietly in the middle of the woods while the knight stands by the wheels. He gets a look in his eyes like he's seeing a ghost, thinking about how much the girl reminds him of the witch who saved his life once. He pulls out an old ring and looks at it, whispering to himself that there's no way it could actually be her. Back inside, Ira explains they're currently in the kingdom of Altian, specifically at the edge of the demon forest in the Feld Duchy. Viola starts blushing and calls out to Ira, feeling a little awkward about the situation. She tries to tell her she can sit up on her own, but Ira won't hear it and insists she stays put and keeps resting. Viola just stays quiet for a moment, her mind racing as she repeats the name of the kingdom of Altian to herself. The kingdom of Altian is one of the world's 3 major powers, currently stuck in a tense stalemate, right on the edge of a massive war with its neighbor, the Senise Empire. Viola thinks back to her old home, the magic kingdom of Nemes, which stays out of these fights since it's tucked away on the southern continent. Ira lets Viola know the man who was just there is actually Duke Noah Leif Feld, a name that Viola recognizes immediately. She looks at him and realizes he's a lot more famous than she thought. Back when she was a court mage, she had to keep track of everyone important, and his name was impossible to forget. He's only 19, and turns out he's been running things since his parents died when he was 10. She remembers hearing that he had to crush every single person who stood in his way to become the Lord, and there are all these dark rumors about him killing off rival nobles just to climb to the top. People call him the Duke of Ice because he never shows any emotion, and Viola realizes she's staying with a legend. Isla realizes she's been helping out this whole time without even knowing who she's talking to. She apologizes and asks for a name, but Viola starts to say her real name before stopping herself. She remembers that she's an exile now, and things are way more complicated than they look. Even though their countries aren't officially fighting, her home is still seen as a major threat. There's a real chance these people might actually recognize her as a high-ranking official, and finding someone from the enemy's inner circle hiding within their borders would be a huge deal. If they ever figured out who she really was, they'd probably throw her in a cell forever or just end her right then and there. She knows she has to keep her identity a secret to stay safe. She feels pretty bad about lying to the people who saved her, but she makes up a fake name on the spot and tells Isla it's Vivi. Isla just smiles, happy to finally have a name to call her. Viola thinks about how Isla mentioned it was actually Duke Noah who found her out in the wild. Apparently, he was suspicious at first and thought she might be a trap, but seeing how messed up she was, he figured she was just a kid running from slave traders. Viola can't help but worry that even though they're helping her, Duke Noah is definitely still suspicious. Isla tells her they can just go over everything tomorrow and that she should get some sleep, and Viola agrees it's for the best. The sun comes up over the trees the next morning as a new day starts. Isla pops by the window to say good morning, asking her how she's feeling after a full night's rest. Viola looks up from the bed and tells her that she's actually feeling a lot better. So Isla claps her hands together, looking totally relieved that her guest is finally doing okay. Viola realizes that since she's finally got her energy back and can move around, there's one major issue. She starts blushing like crazy when she remembers she's only wearing a long shirt with absolutely nothing underneath. She tries to tell herself it is what it is, but knowing she's basically got no clothes makes her feel super awkward. Isla sees her acting all fidgety and asks if she's just hungry, leaving Viola at a loss for words. Isla is all smiles as she grabs Viola, telling her they should go say hi to everyone first. She even warns her to watch the drop as they step down, but Viola is totally dying of shame, thinking about how embarrassing this is even if she looks like a little kid. Meanwhile, their carriage is just parked out by the woods. As they get outside, one of the maids calls out to Isla while another asks if the girl finally woke up and if she's feeling okay. Isla tells them she's taking her to see the master right now, and the knight says that's awesome news, though he makes sure to ask for an intro later on. Isla leans in close, telling Viola that everyone was actually super worried about her and asks if she'll come back to hang out with them later. The kindness really catches Viola off guard. She realizes it's been a long time since anyone was actually this nice to her, and it makes her stop and look back as the other maids wave goodbye with huge smiles on their faces. Once they get inside, Duke Noah doesn't waste any time. He sits there with a serious look and asks her for her name and her age. Viola almost slips up and says her real name before quickly telling him it's Vivi. She then adds that she's pretty sure she is 6 years old. The mood in the room gets heavy fast even with Isla standing right there. It feels like Viola has walked straight into a real interrogation. Noah keeps the pressure on, asking her why she was passed out in a place like that. Viola hesitates, trying to come up with a good lie. She tells him she ran away from a slave trader, though inside she's totally stressing because she knew this question was coming. Noah asks if any other kids escaped with her, but she just looks down and says she's all alone, making the room go quiet for a second before Noah just says he gets it. Viola watches him closely, wondering if that answer actually makes him feel any better about the situation, but then he asks where she's originally from. She lies again, saying she doesn't know the name of her village since there are so many tiny spots in the woods without names. Noah just sits there thinking it over, which makes Viola start sweating. She can tell he's definitely suspicious of her story. She grips her clothes tight, knowing she can't let her real identity slip no matter what. But just then, Isla steps in and asks the Duke if he's got a minute, catching his attention and saving Viola from the hot seat by saying the kid just woke up and needs to eat something first. Noah doesn't hold back. He tells her that even though she looks like a kid, she's still a complete stranger, and they can't just let someone that suspicious hang around without checking them out first. Viola actually gets where he's coming from, thinking that if she were the one in charge, she'd be doing the exact same thing since his job is to keep everyone safe. She knows she has to make a good impression and prove she isn't a threat, but before she can say anything, someone yells for attention from outside. A voice screams for everyone to get to their battle stations, catching all of them completely off guard. Noah immediately rushes to the window to see what's going on, leaving Isla and Viola standing there worried. Outside is a total mess. These dark, shadowy monsters are swarming the camp and the carriage, sending the guards and maids into a full-on panic. Noah grits his teeth, realizing they're totally surrounded, and he can feel this heavy, weird vibe coming from the enemies. He can't believe they're actually seeing these things show up in a place like this. Viola looks out and goes pale. She definitely recognizes what those things are, and it's clearly not good. Noah snaps into commander mode, telling Isla to grab everyone who can't fight and run for it while the rest of them push forward to hold the monsters off. Noah hands over a small blade, telling Isla to take it. He warns her that if things get really bad, they're going to have to find a way to protect themselves. Isla nods, looking terrified as one of the soldiers identifies the enemies as shadow soldiers. He screams for everyone to scatter and keep moving so the monsters can't pin them down, and the group starts splitting up. Someone yells for Isla to get moving, so she grabs Viola and tells her they need to head this way immediately. Noah keeps barking orders, telling his men not to stand their ground or try to fight these things head-on. He knows swords won't do a thing to these bastards, so he tells everyone to just focus on dodging and staying alive. The plan falls apart fast. One of the soldiers gets caught by the dark smoke and screams that it's got his arm, cursing as he gets pulled into the chaos. The monsters are everywhere, looming over the guards like living nightmares. Looking at the dark energy, Viola realizes these things are actually shadow flames, and in the land of Nemes, these beasts are famous for being incredibly brutal and violent. They're total killers, but Viola remembers her old life to a high-level mage. These things are basically just pests. Back when she was a commander, she used to wipe out entire swarms of them around the city like it was nothing. But things are different now. Her magic is completely sealed and she's stuck in the body of a little kid, meaning she can barely even run away, let alone try to fight back. As they keep running, Viola looks up at Isla and asks if it's really true that none of them know how to use any magic at all. Isla looks at the kid and tells her she says the weirdest stuff, explaining that hardly anyone in this territory can use magic at all. She mentions that she's heard there are plenty of magic users over in Nemes, but that doesn't help them much right now. One of the guards tries to keep everyone's spirits up, yelling that Noah has the demon sword and some magic tools to handle these things, but the shadow flames are just too fast, and screams fill the air as the soldiers start getting picked off one by one. Isla calls out to Viola, telling her to hurry up and get over to where it's safe, even though she's looking back at the fight, realizing that at this rate, Noah and the rest of the group aren't going to make it. She lets out a shaky reply, clearly torn about what she has to do next. Viola notices the change in her tone and looks up, asking Isla what's going on. Isla just looks down at her with a sad smile and says she's sorry, making it clear that her main mission is to protect her master, even if it means she has to go against her direct orders to stay back. Isla tells Viola she needs to keep running on her own from here, promising that Noah will definitely find her later on. Viola gets a worried look and says no, trying to tell the group that they can't just stay behind and sacrifice themselves like this. Isla just gives her a kind smile and says that if they stay, they can at least buy her enough time to get away safely. She explains that their lives were saved by Noah anyway, and the other maids agree, saying they don't have any regrets about helping out. Viola stands there looking torn because she knows she can't use any of her usual magic right now, but she realizes there's another way to take these things down using sorcery instead of magic. She's worried that using it might show everyone she's not just some normal kid, but she knows she can't just stand by and watch them die, so she makes up her mind and runs back toward the fight. Isla is completely shocked to see the little girl running the wrong way and screams out her name. Viola drops to the ground and starts looking around for a catalyst, thinking she needs something about the size of her palm to make this work. Viola searches the ground until she finally grabs a stone, saying she found it. She points toward Isla and tells her to hand over that dagger right now, and Isla yells out her name in total shock as Viola tells her to hurry it up. As the energy starts to flow, Isla stares in disbelief and asks what's happening. It turns out the skills called magecraft used to be known as alchemy, and the whole process is just about putting mana into stones or gems and using a keyword to trigger them. While real magic uses your own inner power, this just uses energy from nature, meaning anyone can do it. The only problem is it only creates simple effects, so most people think it's a completely useless art. Even though mages know it exists, nobody cares to learn more than the history. Viola explains how most people think magic is better in every way. They see no point in trying to figure out old languages for research, which is why she kept her studies a secret for so long, especially since nobody else cared about this kind of stuff. She says it's a bit rough, but it should work, right as she triggers a high-level gale wall shield to blast the surrounding area with a massive burst of wind and leaves. Viola yells for everyone to hurry up and gather around her immediately. Noah backs her up and orders everyone to get together as they all rush toward her protection. He asks Isla if she's doing okay, and she quickly replies that she's fine, but then he just stands there staring at Viola's back, asking her what she actually is. She looks back with a smile and tells him it's all right because she's going to protect him, leaving him totally stunned. Suddenly she screams out a warning that things are about to get really loud, so they better cover their ears. Viola calls out a massive spell, Flame Flare Burning Lance Starfall, and fires a rain of light that hits the targets with so much force that everything gets swallowed up in smoke. And just like that, the entire group of shadow soldiers is wiped out in a single instant. Noah stands there with his jaw dropped, trying to process what the hell just happened right. He asks her what she even is, totally stunned by the insane amount of magic power she just used. Viola mumbles that she definitely put too much energy into that one, and Isla freaks out, catching her as she collapses. Isla wonders who this girl really is while Noah just watches, unsure of what to make of the child who just saved them and changed their lives forever. Things shift to a memory where someone is yelling out for their majesty, and a hand reaches out toward a retreating figure, asking why they would ever do something like this. Viola reaches out in a total panic during a nightmare, screaming for King Roy, but she wakes up inside a carriage moving through the bright, sunny woods. A voice tells her she's finally awake as she tries to shake off the dream. It's Noah and Isla, who's looking super relieved that the girl is finally conscious again. Viola asks what happened to her, and Noah explains she passed out right after she trashed that shadow monster, and it all starts coming back to her, remembering how much magic she had to dump into that fight. She suddenly worries about everyone else and asks how the rest of the unit is holding up, but Noah doesn't sugarcoat it. He says more than half of them were injured and things are looking pretty rough. However, he makes sure to let her know that even with all the damage, nobody actually died, looking back at her with a small smile, telling her that they're all alive because of what she did. The carriage finally pulls up to a massive estate and the driver calls out that they've arrived. It's time for business though, as Noah looks back at Viola and tells her she's going to talk now. He gets right in her face and demands the absolute truth, telling her he wants to hear every single detail. So Viola spills everything, leaving Noah sitting at his desk just staring off in total disbelief. He admits that she doesn't seem to be lying, so he decides to trust her for now, letting her know they'll deal with the details of where she's going to stay and what happens next later on. Noah stands up and says that even if her story is hard to wrap his head around, there's no denying she saved them, and he knows his squad would never let it go if he treated their savior like garbage, so he needs to thank her properly. He drops into a deep bow, showing some real respect while finally calling her by her full name, Lady Viola Vikland, and Viola just looks back at him with a huge smile, feeling relieved that he actually believes her. Noah tells Viola to keep their secret talk just between the two of them, and she thanks him for being so understanding. Isla leads her down the hall and tells her it's been a long day, so she really needs to get some sleep. Viola finds herself in a massive, fancy bedroom and stands there. She can't help herself and just dives face first into the bed. It feels amazing as she rubs her face against the sheets, thinking about how long it's been since she had a bed this fluffy, clutching the blanket tight. The reality finally hits her that she actually made it out of that mess alive. Her mind starts racing about the fake charges they used to banish her, and how the king's personality totally flipped. But she realizes there are just way too many things about the whole situation that don't make any sense yet. Looking out at the massive estate, she swears right then and there that she's going to find out the truth. And then the next morning comes around, leaving Viola wandering through the giant hallways and realizing just how huge this place really is. Viola stops in her tracks when she hears a man's voice asking if the price can be lowered, and she immediately recognizes who it is peeking into the kitchen. She sees a delivery guy talking to Isla and realizes that her hunch was right about Aina being there. The guy scratches his head and tells her he's sorry, but there's no way he can go any lower on the price than that. But he tries to smooth things over by promising that their ingredients are extra fresh to make up for the cost. Viola looks on with a bit of sympathy, thinking about how hard it must be for Aina to look after the Duke while also handling all the money. Later on, she spots a young guy looking at his gear and complaining that his sword is totally trashed and needs a replacement. He mentions to his buddy that shadow attacks have been happening a lot more lately, and they didn't even have enough equipment for the raid yesterday. So the other guy wonders if they should actually be putting magic tools first on the list since they're getting new stuff anyway. They both realize that getting more of everything is just asking too much given how tight their budget is right now. And as Viola keeps exploring, she stumbles into a room and is completely blown away by the massive pile of swords just lying around. Bart is kneeling on the floor, checking out the mess of swords that need to be dealt with. He tells Vivi thanks for the help, since he's still not really used to handling all this gear yet. Vivi carries a bundle of swords over and asks if this spot is okay to put them, and he just says yeah. He thanks her again, making her stop and look at him for a second. Bart catches her looking at his bandage and tells her it's just a little something from yesterday, but he realizes she's the girl who saved him and asks to be sure, so she tells him her name is Vivi. He gives her a big smile and introduces himself as Bart, thanking her one more time. He says things would have been way worse if she hadn't shown up, but Vivi looks pretty down and says she still feels bad that he ended up getting hurt at all. Bart drops down to her level to tell her she's wrong. Everyone in the squad is grateful to her, and even the Duke is thankful. Vivi gets to thinking about how she only knows the Duke from what she's read on paper. She figures if they're going to be around each other more, she should probably learn who he actually is. So she asks Bart what kind of person Duke Feld is. Bart looks a bit surprised that she's bringing him up, but he takes a second to think about it. He tells her there are a lot of creepy rumors about the guy, but he's actually pretty nice to the people working under him. Bart adds that there seems to be some serious history between the Duke and his uncle, which leaves Vivi repeating the word uncle in total confusion. He admits he doesn't really have the full story himself, but it feels like the drama just never stops. Bart gives a bit of a weak smile and says that even if a fight broke out, he's useless with his injury and would probably just get tossed aside anyway. Vivi looks on the bright side and asks if that means the Duke isn't a bad guy, since he wouldn't do something like that if he were decent. And Bart just gives a shaky laugh and tells her sure, though he doesn't seem 100% sure about it himself. The two of them sit together on a bench for a bit before Bart asks if he can ask her something too. He brings up the magic she used to save him, telling her he had no clue she was capable of doing something that incredible. Vivi tries to come up with an answer and realizes that telling the whole truth might be too much. She decides she might as well use this situation to her advantage, so she points a finger up and suggests they just look at it as magic, or at least something very similar to it, just to keep things simple for him. She gives Bart a bit of a sneaky smile and tells him to just think of her power as being in that same ballpark. Vivi goes on to explain that unlike regular magic, your age or where you come from doesn't matter at all, and talent isn't even a factor because sorcery is something that anyone can pull off if they really have the heart to learn it. Bart looks pretty impressed by the idea, and Vivi leans in close, asking him if he's actually interested in learning magic himself. Bart gets a little nervous and says he guesses he is, which totally fires Vivi up. She stands tall and tells him he can rest easy because she's going to guide him through everything personally. Bart just laughs and says he might really have to ask her to teach him a few things one of these days. Vivi gets a super intense look in her eyes and says they're going to start from the very beginning with the complete history of sorcery. But the Duke suddenly shows up out of nowhere and catches them together, asking them exactly what they think they're doing. Vivi lets out a surprised shout as a hand suddenly reaches out and grabs her, pulling her away. The Duke catches Bart off guard and tells him to get over here right this second. He sits back at his desk and tells Vivi she's being way too careless, though she doesn't seem to mind. He warns her that people could be trying to set her up and asks why she's going around telling everyone who she is, but Vivi just stays quiet as he tells her she needs to stop trusting people so easily. Vivi gets a pretty dark look on her face and thinks to herself that this is actually her best chance, and she figures the people who framed her are bound to mess up sooner or later, especially once they hear a girl looks just like the vice captain they kicked out. Knowing they'll suspect it's her, she decides she's just going to lure them out herself. She realizes that if there really is a mastermind behind her getting banished from the capital, she'll be waiting to beat them at their own game because she knows she isn't the one in the wrong. Vivi realizes a rumor about a kid using magic won't spread that fast, especially since her power is sealed and she's stuck in this body. She looks pretty worried as she thinks about how they're totally short-handed for any kind of real fight. But Noah stands there looking like the heavy hitter he is. He's got the name and the army they need to actually change things. Vivi walks up to his desk and asks if something is bothering him, and Noah doesn't sugarcoat it, admitting they're falling behind on dealing with all these monster raids and things are getting desperate. with the head maid even having to argue over the price of food just to get by. He mentions they can't get any new magic tools, so the guys are out there using gear that's basically falling apart. The constant attacks are draining their money on repairs and expeditions until they've finally hit a breaking point. Vivi slams her hands down and says she's got a plan to fix this, so she looks him right in the eye with a huge smile and asks why he doesn't just try using her. Noah sounds pretty skeptical, asking what she means by using her, but Vivi doesn't hesitate for a second, giving him a huge yes, and jumping right into the details. She starts listing off everything she can handle, from fixing their money problems by making magic tools to straight-up military strategy and training. She even suggests she could eventually help him build an entire magic soldier corps from the ground up, really leaning into her past. She reminds him that as the former vice-captain of the Nemes Kingdom's Mage division, she has the experience to make it happen. She puts on a big show, promising to give the Duke her full support in every way possible, but Noah isn't just taking her word for it. He leans back and looks her right in the eye, asking what her real motive is for being this helpful. Someone in the manor lets out a shout, sounding like they can't believe what they're hearing. The noise carries all the way outside as Vivi keeps her act together. She puts on a sweet, innocent smile and tells him she just wants to repay him for saving her life earlier. But on the inside, she's playing a much deeper game. She figures if she plays it this way, rumors will spread on their own without her having to do much, though she wonders if her act was a bit too obvious. She admits to herself that her repayment story is usually a lie, but in the end, it doesn't really matter. Vivi looks down at the guy on the ground and realizes the magic he was using feels way too familiar. It's exactly like the stuff from that one incident back in the day, and she starts putting the pieces together. She realizes that if this guy is connected to her past, then letting him run loose might actually be the best move. She figures he'll eventually lead her straight to the people she's really looking for. Looking at her hands, she reminds herself that she isn't that helpless little kid anymore. Things have changed, and now she finally has the power to take her revenge into her own hands. She's ready to handle things her way, but back in the room, Noah tells her he feels bad for dragging her into his mess. Vivi just smiles, secretly thinking she's the one who should feel bad since she's totally using him. Noah officially agrees to her deal, saying he'll take her up on the offer. Vivi plays along perfectly, telling him it's a generous proposal and that she'd love to help out, so just then, Aina walks in to check on them. She excuses herself and lets them know she brought a fresh pot of tea for the table. While she's pouring the drinks, Aina turns to Vivi and asks what she's planning to do next. Noah decides that since Vivi and her group are actually proving to be useful, he's just going to let them do whatever they want for now. Aina nods and says she understands the plan. Vivi looks more determined than ever. She knows the time has finally come to make her move. Noah looks down at an old photo of his family with his parents' faces blurred out, saying he finally has a lead on the people who killed them, and while he takes a sip of his tea, he vows to find the culprit no matter what it takes. Meanwhile, back at a different estate, a messenger finishes giving a report to his master. The Lord just lets out a bored grunt, so the guy starts thinking about the part of the report involving a kid using some really strange magic. He turns to the messenger and calls him out for taking way too long to bring him this information, but the messenger tries to defend himself. He explains that he was actually injured during the monster attack, which is why he's late. The Lord doesn't care at all, he just looks at him like he's dirt, calling him useless trash and saying commoners are all incompetent. He tells the guy to get lost, and the messenger quickly excuses himself from the room. One of his aides tries to speak up, but the Lord just brushes it off with a smug look, saying none of it really matters anyway. The boy walks away through the long hallway, casually mentioning that people who talk too much deserve a proper punishment. And meanwhile, Vivi is just waking up in her room, stretching out with a massive yawn as she gets ready for the day. She's thinking about how she finally got everyone to cooperate, but now she's not quite sure where they should even begin their work. As she walks through the manor, she spots a group of maids and another staff member standing around a door, looking like something is up, and Vivi can't help but notice that the place is starting to get pretty loud and chaotic. She walks over to the group and asks if something happened, while the others just look at her with worried faces. Suddenly, she remembers someone laughing and saying they'd really love for her to teach them a few things sometime. But the vibe changes instantly when she looks into the room and sees a guy face down on the floor, leaving her totally stunned. She's completely freaked out, staring at him and wondering how in the world this happened or why things turned out like this. The rest of the staff rushes in behind her asking what's going on, while everyone stares at the body, wondering what Vivi's next move is going to be. Noah stands over the scene with a cold look while Vivi just stares, whispering his title in total shock. The staff member nearby is shaking, trying to explain that he just went in to check on the weapons and found the guy like that. Noah keeps his cool and tells Aina to handle the rest of the people here, and she quickly agrees to take over so she can lead the group away, asking if they're all right while the other maids are still visibly freaked out by the sight. Noah looks back at Vivi and asks if she's been to Aina's quarters yet. She doesn't even answer, just standing there with a dark look on her face. She's gripping her dress so hard her knuckles are white, wondering why this had to happen right when they finally made it through the worst of it. A memory of Bart flashes through her mind. He was so happy because Noah actually appreciated his magic when everyone else just laughed at him. Noah places a hand on Vivi's head to steady her, promising that as their lord, he's going to make sure his subordinate is avenged. She just looks down and gives a quiet reply, trying to process everything that's happening as the focus shifts to the body on the floor, showing deep wounds that look exactly like they came from a sword. Noah examines the body, pointing out that there aren't any signs of the guy being dragged. He was definitely killed right on the spot. As he looks around the room, he notes that no outsiders should have been able to get in, and they weren't exactly expecting any guests today, so Vivi looks up, trying to wrap her head around the idea that it was an inside job and wondering why anyone would even do this. Just then, Vivi picks up on a strange feeling in the air. She can tell there's some residual mana left behind in the room, and Noah notices something on the floor, reaching out to grab it while Vivi asks what he found. He holds out his hand to show her a few small fragments, and she asks if they're just some kind of stones. She takes a closer look at one of the pieces, realizing she can sense a tiny bit of magical energy coming off it. It hits her that these aren't just rocks, they're actually catalysts that have been completely used up. Vivi explains the stones were used to cast a spell, and when Noah asks if that means magic was used here, she tells him it's almost certain. Moving in for a final check, she looks at the wound and confirms she can sense that same magical energy still lingering right on the body. Vivi looks down at the clues, mentioning that sorcery is the only art that actually uses catalysts like these, meaning every mage has their own unique energy signature, which is basic knowledge in her world. She starts putting the pieces together, and Noah looks over the body, asking for confirmation if she's really saying magic was the cause of death. Vivi starts sensing the energy trail, thinking no real mage would be this careless, especially against a total newbie. It's just too obvious. She realizes no professional would commit a crime this way because the whole setup is way too sloppy. It's almost like the killer was trying to leave a giant sign pointing right at her as the culprit. But meanwhile, a young guy hiding out in the woods starts panicking. He can't believe they've been spotted so fast, and he mentions that with a duke like Noah around, they're probably going to get caught even if they try to blend in as soldiers. The guy starts booking it through the trees, telling the others they need to make a run for it immediately, but Noah is already right on top of him. He steps out with a cold look, telling the guy to stop right where he is. The young guy freezes up. Realizing he's face to face with the Duke, he stammers out the title. Knowing he's in a bad spot as Vivi's eyes narrow while she puts the pieces together, she stops for a second, catching onto a detail that changes everything, and she doesn't hold back, telling the guy straight up that the magic energy left at the scene is a perfect match for his. She looks him in the eye and says he's the one who killed Mr. Burt, leaving the guy panicking, trying to play it off like she's talking nonsense. He asks what she even means by magic traces, acting like the whole idea is crazy since he turns to Noah, desperately asking the Duke if he's actually going to listen to some random kid's story over his own word. He keeps pushing, saying a child's word isn't real evidence, but Vivi just cuts him off. She asks him if he really wants to talk about proof while standing her ground. She tells him flat out that she can see everything he's trying to hide, which just leaves the guy standing there completely confused. Vivi sighs and closes her eyes like she's bored of the excuses. She says it can't be helped if he's going to be difficult, and right then the guy's face changes, and he drops the act. He admits that getting caught this fast was a major mistake. Magic starts swirling around him as he prepares to fight, but Vivi isn't done yet. She points out that he clearly didn't have time to wash up before running, because there's still a massive blood splatter right on his clothes. Vivi points right at him, telling the guy straight up that his little blinding tricks aren't going to work on her. And since magic and sorcery aren't exactly common things to see in this country, it's pretty clear he's standing out. Noah stands by as she keeps going, calling him out for only using half-baked spells that don't really impress her at all. Noah looks the guy over with a serious face. He asks who in the world even taught him to use magic like that, but Vivi is losing her patience. She tells him if he's not going to talk, she's just going to have to force the truth out of him herself. She gets this cold look in her eyes, saying she's afraid she really can't afford to be gentle with him right now, and right as the magic starts to flare up, she tells him flat out that she isn't going to let him escape. She lets loose and the guy gets blasted by a massive swirl of magic. The guy looks completely shocked while Vivi stands her ground, telling him it's time to just give up and accept his fate. Noah reaches for his blade, saying he supposes it can't be helped if things have to end this way. The guy admits his actual orders were just to take out the useless one, but things have clearly changed. Vivi is caught off guard, wondering what he means by orders and who is behind this. The attacker just shrugs it off, looking at Noah and saying he must be the kid mentioned in the report. Noah and Vivi stand ready in the woods while the guy gets this creepy look on his face, laughing about how his boss will be even happier if he brings back Noah's head as a bonus. Suddenly, Vivi notices something's wrong. She sees him putting a magic formula directly onto the ground. She starts to panic when she realizes he's forcing raw energy into a catalyst that's already been used up, which is a total suicide move. And before she can even react, the whole area just blows up in a massive burst of light and energy. Vivi looks completely terrified, thinking to herself that there's no way she can move fast enough to stop the explosion or protect them, but Noah isn't about to let that happen. He grips his sword tight and simply says no. In a flash, Noah swings his blade and cuts right through the magic crystals before they can do any more damage. He calmly asks the guy if he's basically helpless without a catalyst to do the work for him. The attacker just stands there with his mouth open, completely shocked that someone could actually shut down his magic that easily. Vivi stands there completely stunned, watching the pieces of the catalyst fall. She can't believe Noah actually shattered the whole thing with just his sword. Noah turns to her and asks if she's hurt, and she quickly lets him know she's totally fine, though the attacker is starting to look a bit worried. He admits he doesn't have much experience fighting people who actually know how to handle magic. Noah looks Vivi right in the eyes and tells her he needs her strength, which he reaches out his hand, asking her to lend him a hand for what's coming next. Vivi looks up at him, almost moved to tears as she whispers his title, but Noah just keeps it cool. He asks if there's even a reason to be questioning things at a time like this. He reminds her of what he said before, and Vivi gets this confident look on her face. She tells him to go ahead and use her power because the time to act is right now. The attacker just laughs it off, mocking them for being a kid and a swordsman trying to take him on. Vivi just tells him of course they can, and she finishes by trashing his skills, saying his magic technique is basically like a total amateur trying to show off stuff they just learned. Vivi doesn't hold back and calls his technique totally low level, which just makes the guy sweat as he tries to act like it doesn't bother him. The guy starts to lose his temper, demanding to know what she just said to him, while Vivi just gives him this smug look and says she's about to show him what the real deal actually looks like. He snaps and calls her a cheeky brat, but as he tries to lash out, the energy in the air starts shifting and the whole area gets swept up in a massive swirl of magic power. The attacker stands there completely lost, barely able to process what's happening in front of him. Vivi stays perfectly calm as fire circles her, casually mentioning that this is just some basic flame magic, and she asks if he even knows what high-ranking magic is supposed to look like as the spells start getting way more intense. She looks him right in the eye, deciding that she really shouldn't keep tormenting him for much longer. It's time to end this. Looking at the broken pieces in her hand, she thinks about how hard it is to find good catalysts outside of Nerthus, even though she tried to grab everything useful. Vivi realizes she's running low on juice, thinking she's only got enough left for a few more moves. She stands in front of a massive swirl of magic, knowing she has to wrap this up fast or the guy she's fighting is going to get away, even though he's barely holding on and groaning. Noah jumps right into the middle of the action to back Vivi up, standing between her and the attacker, who starts to realize his chances of winning are pretty much gone at this point. Vivi looks at him and tells him he might as well just give up and accept his fate, but just as she's about to finish it, a bright light suddenly explodes right in her face. She shields her eyes, realizing the guy used a flashbang and calling it a totally cheap move while stumbling back through the trees, completely blinded and worried about losing her footing. The crystal that caused the distraction glows one last time before it shatters into pieces. Noah holds onto Vivi and asks if she's doing all right, and she just gives him a quick nod, but then she suddenly reaches out and tells him to wait while she groans in frustration. She looks down at her empty hands and realizes the catalyst she needs is totally gone. She figures she must have dropped it back when that explosion went off, but she can't let those guys get away, even as she stares at her hands in complete shock. The messenger guy is busy running off through the woods, thinking it sucks they didn't kill Vivi and the Duke, but since they finished the main job, he just needs to report back. Suddenly he spins around and yells because a massive wave of magic is spinning around Noah and Vivi as they stand their ground, looking like they're ready to get serious, while Vivi notices that even without the catalyst, her magic power is totally overflowing right now. Vivi looks down at her hand and can't believe what she's seeing right there on the ground is the catalyst ring she thought she lost. She picks it up and smiles, saying this actually works out perfectly for them, and just like that, her magic sharpens into a massive, focused strike. The messenger looks back and panics, realizing he's not getting away so easily. Noah keeps a firm grip on Vivi while her magic goes completely wild, then a huge explosion rocks the woods, tearing up the ground where he was running. The guy ends up pinned to the dirt by dark shadows, barely able to breathe, so Vivi walks right up to him and tells him to start talking. She looks him dead in the eye and demands to know every single thing he's hiding. The messenger is still pinned down when he suddenly freezes, yelling that something else is coming, A massive, terrifying deer-like beast covered in dark smoke steps out from the trees. Noah asks if that's actually a magic beast, while Vivi can't figure out how it even got inside the grounds, but the messenger just starts laughing like a maniac, saying it's a messenger sent from him. He's totally convinced that his boss sent this monster specifically to save him, but he doesn't stop there, pointing at Vivi and saying she's the kid they've been hearing about. The monster just stands over him, making these creepy, broken sounds about needing to kill. It starts leaning in closer, and the guy finally realizes something is wrong, begging it to stop. Noah catches on and yells at Lord Norman, demanding to know what the hell is going on here. But before he can do anything, the messenger lets out a final scream as the beast attacks. The dark deer beast exhales a thick cloud of smoke and Vivi reaches out, looking totally panicked as she tries to do something. But she realizes her magic won't work without a catalyst, leaving her stuck while she and Noah stand their ground against the massive creature in the woods. Just as things get tense, the monster suddenly blurs and disappears, so the two of them are left staring at an empty patch of grass where it just was. Noah asks if that was really a magic beast and why it showed up here, but he has to admit he has no idea. Vivi thinks back to the creature, noting that its energy felt completely different from any normal beast. She's visibly shaken, demanding to know who could actually be behind this. Noah just looks ahead and tells her that it's already too late. Vivi looks down at the dark, stained ground. She just doesn't understand any of this anymore. Thinking back to the monster, she wishes she could have stopped it right then and there, but she's stuck feeling like she failed to make it in time once again. Noah starts walking off, telling her this isn't over yet, and Vivi follows close behind him. He starts questioning things. Why would someone kill a guy just to silence him using a monster? Vivi's eyes go wide as she realizes that beast didn't just pick a random person to attack. The Duke seems totally sure of himself, and like he said, they're far from finished here. Everything comes back to why Mr. Burt was killed, and why the culprit ended up dead too. It all ties into that weird monster. But there's one thing they know for certain now. As Vivi walks through the trees, she realizes someone else out there is actually using magic. Ever since King Roy went through that huge change, he's been making sure no one can find any info on sorcery. And while people outside of Nemes might know a bit about magic, you definitely won't find any sorcerers just hanging out in the open. Noah looks over at Vivi and tells her the guy mentioned someone named Lord Norman right before he died, asking if the name rings a bell. Vivi looks totally stunned as Noah reveals that the man is actually his uncle, which explains why Bart mentioned the two of them don't get along, a fact that Noah admits is completely true. Since the day his parents were murdered, his uncle has been obsessed with taking his title, even sending his own men to come after him. Because of that, Noah hasn't been able to trust a soul besides his inner circle since he was just a little kid, and Vivi looks at him with a lot of pity, realizing that must be why everyone started calling him the Duke of Ice. Noah crouches down to check the area, noting that this is the first time his uncle has ever used a subordinate who can use magic. He keeps thinking about it, because as far as he knows, his uncle has never had any connection to the magic world at all. Vivi points out that it's pretty unlikely a random subordinate just learned how to use magic like that all on his own, and Noah starts thinking that whether it's his uncle behind this or someone else entirely, it's clear that someone had to have taught the guy how to handle that specific spell. Vivi gets a sharp look in her eye, realizing there has to be a magic user working closely with the Duke's uncle. She starts connecting the dots between the uncle, the magic, and Nemes, feeling like there are still way more secrets hidden under the surface. Noah decides there's no point in just standing around wondering about it, so he tells her he's going to go ask the man directly. He suggests they go pay his uncle a visit right now, and Vivi agrees to head out with him. Deep in the woods, a lone deer stands in a quiet clearing for a second before it suddenly gets taken down and collapses into the grass, making a loud thud as a woman dressed as a nun watches from the trees, with a creepy smile whispering Viola's real name to herself. The nun watches from the shadows with a creepy smile, thinking to herself how she never expected to run into her target in a place like this. She stares with a sharp look in her eye, knowing Vivi is a major obstacle to their plans. She even considers just taking her life right then and there, but as she watches Noah and Vivi walk away into the distance, she decides she's changed her mind for now. With a smug grin, she whispers that they'll definitely meet again soon, referring to her as the human magic user. The scene shifts to a carriage traveling down a bumpy dirt road, heading toward the uncle's estate while Vivi sits inside looking at the books, wondering what's been happening back in Nemes since she left. Noah explains that the country is still completely isolated, cutting off all contact with the rest of the world. He mentions they've been getting way stricter lately, so there's really no way for anyone on the outside to know what's going on in there. Noah rests his head on his hand, repeating that they're basically in the dark, and Vivi can't help but agree as she stands there thinking. Noah notices her expression and asks if there's something specific on her mind that's bothering her. Viola stands in front of Noah's desk and points out that Nemes and the Duke's uncle are definitely connected, leading to the realization that the common link between them is magic itself. She mentions how weird it is since they've cut off the outside world, but then adds that there's more to it than just that. She explains that almost nobody back in Nemes even uses magic these days. It turns out King Roy has been purging all magic, making people so scared they won't even say the word, which makes the fact that an outsider was using it even crazier. She even wondered if the guy was actually from Nemes. Noah sits there and simply says he doesn't think so, looking pretty annoyed as he admits he thought the guy was a loyal servant for years, but he was totally set up. Viola looks off to the side, admitting that seeing real magic being used makes her really uneasy about what's going on back home. She says that even though she was exiled, it's still her country and she can't stop worrying about it. Viola starts worrying about what'll happen if magic actually gets popular back in Nemes, and she's so in her head that Noah has to call out her name. She totally freaks out, wondering if the whole reason she was exiled was just to keep her out of the loop, but Noah tells her he's pretty sure that's not it. She tries to get back on track by saying they should put the jokes aside, though Noah isn't even sure if she was actually kidding, so she looks out the window and mentions how the country was already a total mess before she left, thanks to all the drama with magic users and that demon beast. Staring outside, she admits she's getting a really bad vibe about the whole situation. She says she's hoping for the best, but her face says she's expecting things to go south, leading Noah to tell her he'll do what he can to dig up info on Nemes from his end, which earns him a very polite thank you. Later on, Viola sits in a carriage and can't help but worry if her father and the rest of the kingdom are going to be alright. But meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, things are already starting to get a bit loud and messy. A guy gets cornered by some guards and starts yelling at the top of his lungs that he's innocent and didn't do anything wrong. A loud voice cuts through the noise of the city, telling everyone to shut up and listen. The accuser guard points right at a guy, yelling that he broke into the castle and tried to kill the king, and claims they've got all the proof they need. The accused man tries to stop them, shouting that there's no way they have any evidence because he's innocent, but he just keeps screaming that he didn't do it and hasn't even set foot in the castle. As they shove him into a cage, he reaches out his hand and begs for anyone to just believe him. The people watching just wonder if this is really happening again, talking about how the whole country is becoming a total mess. A couple of women stand off to the side gossiping, with one asking the other if she's heard the latest rumors. She mentions that the general store owner's daughter is still missing after she just vanished into thin air. The other woman can't believe it's already been a month since the girl disappeared, and meanwhile it turns out the shop owner across the street has been gone for 2 months now, and nobody knows where anyone is going. People in the city are losing it, wondering where everyone could have gone and just hoping they're found soon. The walls are covered in missing person posters, and everyone's saying it's not just the crime that's bad, but the number of people vanishing is getting scary. Looking up at the castle, the locals are just stressed out, wondering what the hell is happening to the country lately. Inside a hidden room, a massive cannon-like machine sits there glowing with weird magic runes. King Roy stands right next to it with that mysterious woman in the nun outfit leaning on him. Roy asks if the work is moving along like it's supposed to, and a soldier nearby tells him everything is going perfectly. But the soldier looks at the giant device and asks what something like this is even going to be used for. He's clearly shaking, asking if this is meant for war, while Roy just stares at him with these creepy, slit-like eyes. Roy tells the guy it's totally fine and that he doesn't actually need to know a single thing. The soldier's face goes from being worried to completely blank, like his mind just got wiped on the spot. The mysterious woman in the nun outfit says she understands the plan, while the kid standing between them looks totally freaked out. King Roy seems like he's losing his grip on things, just scratching his head with a blank look like he can't even process what's happening. So the woman tells him it's time to get moving, and Roy just lets out this weird shout like he's completely out of it. Moving on to a massive library filled with rows of old books, the woman stands in front of Roy's desk and asks how Duke Vikland is holding up lately. She just gives this cold smile and says it really doesn't make any difference at all. Her eyes look pretty scary as she explains that the Duke is still begging and saying his daughter is innocent. She thinks he should have accepted the truth a long time ago. Roy sits there with his hands together, just giving a short reply that he gets what she's saying. She goes on to say that even if the Duke did a lot for the country in the past, he's still the father of a criminal now. And with a creepy grin, she says he needs to be forced to realize how bad that actually is. Down in a dark dungeon cell, a man sits alone behind the bars while King Roy stares off with a stressed look on his face, quietly saying that he knows what's going on. He sits at his desk repeating the word criminal like he's trying to make sense of it. Roy looks completely shocked, questioning if Vivi actually did those things and telling himself there's no way it's true. But the woman in the nun outfit shuts him down immediately, telling him that Viola Vikland was trying to spread magic, which she calls a suspicious art, and then she leans in closer to tell him that Viola is a serious criminal who planned to kill him, which is why she was sent away. As Roy's eyes go wide with fear, she claims they had to put a forbidden spell on the girl just to make sure she could never do anything evil again. She gives this really creepy, wide-eyed look and tells him he better not forget any of this. Roy just lets out a quiet sound and agrees with her like he's in a trance. He's completely under her thumb now. She finally says she has to go because it's almost time for prayer, and Roy just tells her okay. The nun keeps up her act, telling the king that it's her duty as the saint to stay in the prayer room, so she makes sure to tell Roy he absolutely shouldn't disturb her while she's in there. Once she's walking down the hall alone, she lets out a breath and says that was way too close. She knows she has to redo the hypnosis on him soon, since things would get messy if he actually got his head straight. Looking out the window, she thinks about how all the magic in the kingdom will belong to her once the experiment is finished. She stares at the city below, obsessed with the idea of finally getting her revenge. Her face twists into a scary grin as she yells about how those humans stole magic from her kind, and then she suddenly snaps out of her rant, remembering she has a guest showing up later today. She mentions needing to get back to that person's side, and just like that she's gone, leaving nothing but a weird dark puddle on the floor. The carriage finally comes to a stop as someone announces that they've arrived. Noah looks out at the massive mansion, thinking about how it's been forever since he was last at this place. As they step inside, a whole line of maids is there to greet them, welcoming Duke Feld back home. One of the staff points them toward the stairs, saying the master is already inside waiting for them. The Duke's uncle shows up with a big smile, saying he's really happy to see Noah after all this time. He brings up the past, mentioning that the last time they actually saw each other was at Noah's parents' funeral. Noah looks down and keeps it polite, agreeing that it definitely has been a long time since then. Viola stands back and watches the interaction, realizing that this guy is actually the Duke's uncle. And then she notices a woman in a fancy dress nearby who's wondering if Viola is actually the Duke's wife. Viola just stands there looking completely confused by the whole situation. The woman in the dress watches them with a smirk. She gets this weird feeling about the whole thing, and Lord Norman turns his attention toward the maid standing nearby, asking her who she is. Viola gives a polite curtsy, telling him it's an honor to meet him and that her name is Vivi. Noah steps in to explain. He tells his uncle that she's staying with them because of some specific circumstances. Norman just grins, leaning in to ask if Noah actually came here for something more than just a visit, which leads them all to the sitting area, where Norman nods along, saying he sees how it is. Noah tries to call him out on something, but Norman just looks at him and asks what about it. The room goes quiet as Noah looks down, clearly annoyed by how his uncle is acting. Norman puts on a smug face and claims that the trouble was just the work of some imposter. He doubles down, saying he never gave orders like that and doesn't even recognize the guy Noah's talking about. Norman plays it cool, asking why he'd even bother sending a spy to Noah's place. He claims there's just no reason to do it, and Viola stares at him, wondering if he's actually telling the truth about everything. She thinks back on how the plan to take out the Duke totally failed in the end. But she realizes it's possible the Duke is still keeping watch to see if anyone caught onto his move. It's not just about watching either. He's probably just waiting for the right moment to finish the job, but something still feels off to her even though a guy famous as the Ice Duke showed up with a random little girl. Norman doesn't even look the least bit surprised to see her there. His whole attitude makes it feel like he already knew she was coming along, which makes Viola wonder exactly how much this guy has figured out. She questions if he even knows she's from Nemes. Norman just sips his tea with a smug look, telling Noah there's no way he'd ever do something like that to his favorite nephew. Norman lets the silence hang for a second, setting his teacup down. He starts to say, or maybe he just wants to know if Noah actually has any proof to back up these claims. Norman plays the victim, saying without proof it's just a false accusation. He claims making guesses like that is pretty pathetic. He leans in with a nasty grin and says it's exactly like the situation with Noah's mom and dad, and the comment clearly hits home. Viola looks over at the Duke, seeing how much this is getting to him. The room goes quiet under the heavy chandeliers. The tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. Noah stares him down, saying everything feels just like it did back then, the same games and the same lies. Viola realizes they messed up. She wishes they had used magic to record the messenger's confession while they had the chance. She thinks about how the hit on the Duke's family happened years ago, which means any normal evidence is probably long gone. But if Norman hired an assassin, there might still be a record hidden away. Noah's younger cousin, Louis, looks down, frustrated that they can't actually bring Norman to justice, even if they know he's guilty. Moving on, Noah and Viola are walking through the hall when a voice suddenly calls out from behind asking if that's really Noah. The kid runs up with a huge smile, shouting that he knew it was his brother. He looks genuinely happy to see him. Noah pulls Louis into a hug and asks how he's been, since it's been a while, and the kid just smiles and says he's doing great. Noah explains that she's actually their uncle's child, but Louis looks over at her and asks who she is, so Viola gives him a big smile and says her name is Vivi, explaining she's just staying with the Duke's family for a bit because of some stuff at home. She starts to say it's a pleasure to meet him, but right then, a hand reaches out and the vibe changes. Viola senses something and moves fast, dodging out of the way while everyone else is caught off guard. She's completely shocked by what she's feeling. She can barely even speak because whatever just happened is massive. Louis can feel it too. He says there's a magical presence here that's nothing like hers, and he demands to know who's there. Louis freezes as a massive, alien-looking figure appears right behind him. He can't help but wonder what this terrifying thing is. The spirit stares ahead with cold eyes and tells everyone to stay back, while Louis stands there looking like he's seen a ghost. Noah looks around totally confused and asks what's happening, since he can't see the massive entity standing right in front of them. But Viola sees it clearly, and is stuck wondering why a spirit would even show up in a place like this. The voice of a mage starts explaining that the creature is a spirit, a being made of pure magic, and it turns out these things are actually manifestations of magic that the mages in Nemusu can't live without, making them pretty special. Viola turns to Noah and asks if he can actually see the thing, but he just lets out a weird sound while walking off, so she realizes that almost nobody outside of Nemusu has the ability to see spirits, making it a huge shock to find someone nearby who can. She looks over at Louis and realizes he's seeing it too. The kid is visibly shaking because he's staring straight at the monster. And then the pressure from the spirit's magic suddenly spikes, hitting Viola so hard she can barely keep her balance as the wind kicks up. The spirit stares right at Viola and points out she's definitely not a local. It can smell magic on her, but can't find a single trace of mana, which gets even weirder when the spirit realizes she uses the exact same techniques as some other woman it knows. Viola is completely caught off guard by that, wondering who this other woman is and how they could possibly have the same skills, but Noah steps in with a serious look, telling the spirit that Viola is with him and that she's someone who can be trusted. Viola just looks up at him and whispers his title, clearly touched that he's standing up for her like that. Louis watches them and starts thinking that if it's these two, they might actually be able to help, though he's still a bit hesitant, until he finally finds his courage and begs his brother to help him and save their house from whatever is going on. The scene shifts to a quiet room inside the mansion where a chandelier hangs over the heavy furniture, and Louis leads them to a specific spot, pointing it out while Viola notices that everyone in the place seems to be totally on edge. She knows a simple locked door won't stop people from listening in, so she holds out her hand and explains she's put a sealing spell on everyone to keep things private. Noah looks at Louis and asks him if he would mind telling them the whole story behind what's happening, and Louis explains that everyone in the house is being manipulated by his father's second wife, a woman named Cecilia, who Noah remembers seeing earlier. He asks for clarification, making sure she's the woman who was standing right next to his uncle. Louis nods and tells them that right after his mother passed away from being sick, his father just suddenly brought this woman home. He continues the story, saying that's exactly when everyone in the mansion started acting really strange. Now, everyone does whatever Cecilia says, and his father has even locked himself away in the annex to perform suspicious rituals. Viola listens to the description of the house's weird behavior and wonders out loud if this could all be the work of magic. Louis looks pretty shaken and says he's been able to see things other people can't since he was a little kid, and that's how he's so sure. He drops a bombshell, telling them that woman isn't even human because he can feel a crazy powerful force coming from her. Noah realizes his own gut feeling was right. He knew something was off, but turns out the situation is way bigger than he thought. Cecilia watches from the shadows, thinking to herself about how she's definitely seen that person somewhere before. Meanwhile, Louis explains that when things got crazy and he felt totally alone, this fire spirit just showed up to help him. But even with the spirit's help, the kid looks pretty worried. He admits that there's still no match for that woman. He's desperate now, begging Noah and Vivi to step up and save everyone before things get any worse back in the main house. Cecilia is listening in, calling Louis a useless brat for even mentioning her name. Lord Norman is right there with her, looking annoyed and saying they can't just let Noah roam free. He's actually wishing he'd just killed the guy when he had the chance. Norman looks at Cecilia and tells her it's not too late to finish the job, and she just gives this creepy smile, telling him to relax and leave it all to her since everything is going according to plan anyway. She stares out the window with magic fire in her hand, still shocked that a human actually had that ring. She knows she needs it for whatever she's plotting, and the only thing on her mind now is finding a way to take it back for herself. Cecilia stands over the room with her magic active, telling Louis that she's figured out he's plotting something with Vivi, and she laughs about how Vivi's spell on the door is completely useless since she sees everything that goes on in this mansion. Walking through the shadows, she calls Louis a bad boy for going behind his parents' backs and promises he's going to disappear too. She lets her shadow beasts loose, calling them her lovely pets as she sends them out to finish the job. And back in the room, Noah notices Vivi looking completely pale and asks her what's wrong, but she's too focused on the door, realizing right then that there's definitely something dangerous waiting just on the other side. She yells for the Duke to watch out, and Noah immediately tells everyone to get back while Louis tries to scramble away. The lock gets smashed into pieces from a massive hit. Vivi gets her magic ready and shouts in surprise when she realizes a monster is actually the one breaking in. The beasts fly into the room as Vivi tries to block them. The door finally gives way, and Noah realizes the attackers aren't holding back. They're actually trying to kill everyone in the room, and Vivi doesn't back down, telling him she's fine with a fight and plans to just smash right through whatever is coming, but she stops cold when she sees who's actually attacking, totally confused by why these people are acting so crazy. She spots a weird magical aura around them and realizes they're being controlled. It's a mess because she can't even move or fight back properly, while Noah yells her name as the shadow beasts lunge into the room, cutting off any chance of a quick escape. Looking at the pack of monsters, Vivi wants to just blast them all at once, but she's got a major problem. She's completely out of catalyst for her magic. It clicks that her bad feeling about the mansion was right. Someone went through and cleaned out every single thing she could have used for a spell, and she's pretty annoyed by how thorough they were in making sure she was basically defenseless. But then a spirit suddenly appears behind her. It tells her it'll help her out for the sake of the kid, leaving Vivi totally stunned. She gets her confidence back instantly, realizing that with the spirit's help, she actually has a chance to turn this whole thing around. Vivi doesn't waste any time and shouts out for a wind spear. She blasts a hole right through the monster and stops for a second, looking totally shocked as she realizes exactly where they've ended up. Aina is right there holding onto Louis. She's completely blindsided and asks the kid what he's even doing there, but Noah cuts her off, saying they can talk about the details later since they need to get somewhere safe immediately. They try to make a run for it, but it turns out every single window and door in the place is totally jammed, and Vivi looks at the inner door, pointing out that it isn't nearly as tough as the main entrance they just came through. Louis looks a bit nervous and asks her what she's planning. Vivi just gives him a confident smirk and says it's simple. She lets loose with a massive blast of magic that completely wrecks the door in a huge explosion. Vivi is all smiles and cheers about getting it open. Meanwhile, Noah just stands in the back looking exhausted by her methods. They find the rest of the staff huddled together, and Noah asks if everyone is accounted for. The maids tell him that's everyone. Vivi looks at the group and tells them she's put a magic barrier around the room. She promises they'll be safe here for now. Noah stands tall and says it's time for them to head out and take down the source of the trouble. Louis isn't having it and shouts that he's coming along with them. He looks like he's ready to fight. Noah drops down to the kid's level and says he can't let him get put in danger. He tells him to stay back and leave it to them. Vivi watches them and knows this whole situation is getting dangerous. She's starting to piece things together and figures her uncle and Cecilia have to be the ones behind this mess. Even weirder, she didn't see any signs of magic controlling the guy. It hits her right then that the two of them must be working together on purpose. Vivi knows she has to keep her suspicions quiet for now, so she just puts on a smile and tells everyone not to worry. Louis turns to a spirit and asks if he can follow the spirit brothers. The spirit gives him the okay as they get ready. The staff tells them to be careful out there, and they promise to stay safe as they finally head out. Louis stands out in the hallway for a second, just waiting by the big doors before he and Vivi start following the glowing spirit down the corridor. They move deeper into the house, and Vivi starts thinking about how the spirits she saw back in Nemesis almost never messed with people, unless someone was actually casting magic right then. She looks up at the guide and mentions how rare it is for a spirit to actually take a human's side like this. But then the spirit points out that the magic density around here is actually pretty high. It goes on to explain that this place used to be full of spirits. It spent its days protecting the land with its friends and helping out whenever they could. But as time went on, their numbers just kept dropping until eventually, this one was the only spirit left in the forest. Vivi realizes that reports about spirits disappearing were popping up back in Nemesis 2. Turns out, she was the one looking into it back when she was the vice captain, but she got kicked out of the country before she could ever find out what was actually causing it. The spirit just looks away, thinking about how it spent such a long time living there completely alone. The spirit remembers back to when it first ran into that crying kid. The little guy was just standing there all alone, sobbing. It was actually a total shock for the spirit, mostly because no human had ever been able to see it before that moment. As soon as the spirit saw the mansion and the people living there, it knew right away that some demonic beings were threatening the place. Even if the spirit wanted to step in and help out, it realized it couldn't actually fix the situation on its own, so it looks at Vivi and Louis, asking these children of men if they can please help the child since it can't do it alone. Vivi doesn't even hesitate, giving a big smile and telling the spirit that of course she'll help out. They start moving through the hallway as Vivi explains that a spell is covering the whole mansion. To break it, they have to find the source. Louis reaches out to a window, asking if that means the source is hidden in one of the rooms they're passing. Vivi tells him no, because the magic is actually a trap to keep everyone locked inside, and the person behind it wouldn't lock themselves in. She gets a serious look on her face, figuring there must be a hidden path leading from the mansion to another building nearby. Even though Vivi is looking for another house nearby, there isn't a single building to be found anywhere around the estate, just an empty view. Suddenly, Vivi gets grabbed and tells whoever it is to let go, looking completely caught off guard as she looks back at Noah and tells him he was being way too careless, while he just stands there surprised and says her name. Vivi can't believe a guy like him actually fell for a basic blinding spell, but as she talks, the air starts to change and swirling magic begins to peel away the empty landscape, revealing a massive hidden building right in front of them. Vivi points it out and explains that the people inside can see them, even though they couldn't see the building until just now. She breaks it down for Noah, telling him the whole thing was just a magical illusion designed to hide the truth. Noah is floored by the building appearing out of nowhere, but Vivi is already focused. She says the source of the magic must be right inside there. With a look of total determination, Vivi stares at the house and says she's coming for the person behind this right now. Watching from a window inside, Cecilia sees them coming and casually notes that they figured it out a lot faster than she thought they would. Inside the hidden building, Cecilia realizes her illusion didn't hold up for long. She expected they'd see through the disguise, so she just shrugs it off with a smile. She says she isn't a fan of fighting, but she's ready to deal with them anyway. Downstairs, Vivi and Noah finally make their way inside the mansion. They step through the main entrance and find the whole place is completely empty. Noah points out how weirdly quiet it is, and Vivi just nods along because she can feel something is off. She tells Noah to stay sharp since the thing running his uncle's house definitely isn't human. Right then, Lord Norman shows up out of nowhere. He looks at them and says their little visit is going to be a problem, but dark energy starts crawling across the floor toward the two of them. It's clear they aren't alone anymore, and Lord Norman acts like he's just being a host, telling them this isn't the kind of place guests should be walking into. Vivi is stunned for a second as she looks closer at what's going on. She catches something that changes everything. She realizes Cecilia is just like all those creepy servants they saw in the halls. She's just being used and manipulated. Vivi grunts in pain as the dark energy pins her down. She's completely stuck, shocked by how much power is holding her back. Cecilia just laughs and tells her to stop fighting it, or she might actually end up losing some limbs. She leans in close to mock how the famous vice commander of the Magic Knights got turned into such a cute little kid, and Vivi freezes up when Cecilia looks her right in the eyes and says her real name, Viola. Vivi's heart sinks as she demands to know how this woman knows who she is and what she actually is, but looking closer, she can see it clearly. Whatever is standing in front of her isn't even slightly human. Cecilia just stares back for a second like she's confused by the comment. Then she gets offended, telling Vivi not to group her in with a creature like her since there's a limit to how insulting someone can be. She dismisses Vivi entirely, telling her she isn't even the one she's here to deal with. She's got bigger plans. And turning her focus over to Noah, she points out the ring he's holding as if that was her goal all along. Cecilia leans in with a creepy smile and tells Noah she wants him to hand it over right now, referring to the ring he's been keeping hidden, which leaves Vivi looking completely caught off guard by the demand. Noah looks away for a second, admitting he has no clue how she found out about it, but that ring is way too precious to him. He stares her down with an intense look in his eyes and tells her straight up he isn't giving it to anyone, so the ring starts to glow with a bright light as its power wakes up. Noah drops into a combat stance, dark energy swirling around him. Noah asks Vivi to confirm if the woman standing there really isn't human, and Vivi shouts back that she definitely isn't. Hearing that, Noah charges forward with his sword drawn, telling Cecilia that since she's a monster, he won't be showing any mercy. He swings hard and actually manages to land a hit, making Cecilia grunt as his blade cuts right through her dark energy. Cecilia just stands there clutching her wound and starts laughing to herself, acting like the pain is actually funny. Cecilia smiles with a creepy look in her eyes and says how terrifying that was, clearly not bothered, even though she mocks the idea of a duke just slashing at people out of nowhere. Watching from the side, Vivi realizes this isn't going to be an easy fight. It's clear Cecilia is running on some weird energy, making Vivi wonder if she's the same as a magic beast, but Cecilia gets offended and tells her not to lump her in with creatures like that. Before anyone can react, Cecilia shoots out a hand of dark energy and grabs Noah by the face, lifting him off the ground. He can barely make a sound as she tells him she was going to let him go if he gave up the ring, but she's changed her mind. She decides it'll just be faster to kill him instead, tightening her grip while Vivi watches in total shock and screams out for the Duke. Noah manages to yell back to Vivi, telling her to take something and use it right now. Louis looks completely stunned. He's just standing there frozen when someone calls his name, and Vivi shows up right when things are getting intense. She says she told him to wait, but she just couldn't stay back, and she's actually smiling as she tells Noah he did a great job. She's got a magic tool ready to go. A massive blast of magic hits Cecilia and sends her flying back. The blast forces her to let go of Noah. He drops to his knees gasping for air while Vivi rushes over, asking if he's okay. Cecilia isn't done yet though. She just stares Vivi down with this look like she's finally realizing who she's dealing with. Over on the side, that spirit figure is complaining about Vivi not waiting. Louis just looks down, apologizing for not being able to stop her from jumping in. Louis turns his attention back to his father. He looks totally heartbroken as he whispers the word father, and he starts getting desperate, asking why his dad doesn't recognize him. He's begging him not to walk away. Vivi watches the whole thing and realizes what's actually happening. She tells the group that the man is being controlled, and Cecilia is definitely the one pulling the strings. Cecilia sighs, sounding totally over it while she complains about how things just keep going wrong, but then the shadows move fast, snatching Louis up while Norman yells out the kid's name in a panic. Louis looks completely terrified. He can't even process what's happening as the darkness wraps around him. Norman loses his cool, screaming at Cecilia and demanding to know why she's breaking her promise to leave his son alone. She doesn't even care, just looking at him with those cold eyes and saying he's being a real pain. The shadows lash out at Norman. He lets out a choked groan as they slam into him. Norman drops to the floor hard, and Louis screams for his father while he hangs there helpless in the air. Vivi has seen enough. She powers up her magic and tells Cecilia to let the kid go right now. Cecilia just gives her this mocking smile, asking Vivi if she's really sure she wants to start something. She starts talking about how a kid with the right magic talent might actually be useful for her plans, and it's clear she's not letting go. Cecilia keeps talking about her dark magic, mentioning the specific spell used to turn others into magical beasts, while Vivi yells out that she's never heard of a technique like that in her life. But Cecilia just tells her it's because humans have no clue it even exists. Vivi is visibly shaken as Cecilia explains that this is a special power only her kind can use, and it's clear that the magic humans use is just a weak imitation compared to the true magic they wield. Cecilia wears a creepy smile as she finally drops the truth. Only demons are capable of such power. Vivi can't even believe what she's hearing, just whispering the word demons under her breath in total shock. Cecilia looks at the mess and notes that they really did a number on her creatures, but she was planning on restocking her supply soon anyway. She mentions how she tried the same thing on the local spirits a long time ago, though back then, it ended in failure. The fire spirit finally realizes the truth, calling out Cecilia for being the one who hurt all of its friends. Cecilia acts like it's no big deal, just sounding surprised that one of her old specimens actually managed to slip away from her. Cecilia has this creepy grin on her face, admitting she's surprised anyone actually survived her past experiments, and then the fire spirit completely loses it, screaming at her while launching a massive blast of flames across the room, so Cecilia gets caught in the heat. The spirit tells her she's next on the list, but Cecilia just looks annoyed because she sighs and says things aren't exactly going according to plan right now, though she's got a weird feeling that Vivi might actually be the one to pull off something crazy. Staring her down with this intense look while Louis is standing back, looking totally worried and just hoping that whatever happens next actually works out. But things take a turn for the worse. Vivi screams for Louis as he realizes he's not going to make it out in time, leaving Vivi reaching out, yelling that she's not losing anyone else today. Just as this massive wave of dark energy explodes right in front of her, filling the entire space with a giant wall of black magic that cuts right between her and Louis, completely blocking them off from each other. Vivi and Louis stand there completely frozen as they realize the fire spirit has actually turned into a magical beast, and Cecilia is loving every second of it, calling the whole thing amazing as the creature's massive eye stares them down. She's got this wild look on her face, admitting it wasn't exactly what she planned, but she's just happy it finally worked. But then she starts overthinking it. She mentions how many times they failed in the past and says they really need a way to make this more consistent. She looks at the dark mass and notes the shape is still a bit shaky, though she's sure it'll settle down and stabilize soon enough, so she leans in and asks the monster how it feels to have a brand new body, telling it that being like that has to be the best. Louis is just standing there shaking. He can't believe what he's seeing and just keeps saying there's no way this is real, while Cecilia gets this cruel smile, telling them that now she's got a success story. Everyone else is basically useless to her. She decides right then that it's time to get rid of the nuisances standing in her way. And as the monster moves in, Louis desperately tries to reach out, shouting to the spirit that it's him and begging it to remember who he is. Vivi tries to get the creature's attention, yelling out to it as Louis stands there completely frozen. The monster lunges forward and Vivi screams for him to watch out, calling his name in a panic because the thing is moving way too fast for him. So she jumps in and yanks him back just as the monster's massive arm slams into the ground, barely missing them. Vivi looks at the huge crater left behind and realizes she'd be dead if that hit had actually landed, but Louis won't give up. He steps forward and shouts at the beast, asking if it really doesn't recognize him anymore. Vivi tries to pull him back, telling him to stop because it's way too dangerous to get close, while Cecilia just watches them with this smug look. She tells Louis that calling out to the thing is a total waste of time. She explains that the spirit is gone and it's just a monster now, one that only lives to kill every human it sees. The monster lets out a wild scream and charges again, leaving Louis completely terrified as Vivi tries to keep him safe. The monster slams the ground, and everyone realizes a spirit actually turned into a magical beast. Just crazy to see it attacking Louis when it used to care about him, and Vivi knows their voices aren't reaching it. She looks at the creature and wonders if they really have to kill it, but then Vivi suddenly takes off running toward the beast. Noah yells out for her, wondering what she's doing since the body of a magical beast is usually just a mass of energy without any real substance. But Vivi looks at her hand and points out that normally, you wouldn't be able to touch it like this at all. Noah is surprised, asking if it really has a physical form. Vivi explains that since the spirit was forced to change, the magical energy inside isn't settling the way it should be. She starts to explain what that means, and Louis' eyes light up as he realizes that the spirit hasn't fully turned into a monster yet. There's still a chance to save him. Vivi looks at the creature and realizes that if they act fast, they might still be in time to save it. But Louis just can't believe what he's hearing and tells her there's no way. Louis grabs her and asks if she really means she can turn him back. But Vivi tells him it's not that simple. She explains how both sorcery and magic have these things called forbidden arts, and the reason they're forbidden is because using that kind of power goes against how nature is supposed to work. Vivi points out that these spells are basically locked away and only used in the most extreme cases, like right now, since one specific dark spell can turn one living thing into another, meaning they might be able to change him back before he fully turns into a beast. Louis is shocked and asks if she's for real, but Vivi looks him in the eye and tells him she's a proud mage of Nemusu, so he better not underestimate her. Even though she's clearly stressed out about it, she knows this is an emergency and there's no other choice. Louis holds onto Vivi, admitting that he really wants to save the spirits, but just doesn't have the strength to do it himself. So he tells her straight up that she's the only one he can count on right now. He promises he'll do anything he possibly can to help, and that's why he's asking for her help. Vivi just stands there for a second, quietly saying his name as she thinks about what to do next. She starts to turn away, mentioning that helping people wasn't even the reason she got into magic research originally. But then she turns back with a huge grin and asks what kind of mage would she be if she didn't help someone in trouble. She gets all fired up and tells him she's going to show him exactly how a pro handles things, bragging that he's about to see the real power of an archmage. Louis looks at her with total awe, his eyes lighting up as he realizes she's actually going to do it. Vivi gets a little spark in her eye, reminding him that since she's been exiled, she doesn't have to follow any of those old rules anymore. She starts laughing, saying she can basically get away with anything now, and she's not going to pass up a rare chance to test out some forbidden magic, even if Louis is a little worried about how it'll turn out. Cecilia shows up with this creepy smile, asking the two of them if they really thought she'd just forget about them. Things are getting intense fast. She tells them she isn't sure what they're trying to pull, but whatever the plan is, it's not going to work. She gets even darker, saying that since they've seen too much already, there's no way she can let them walk out of there alive. Vivi is completely stressed out because Cecilia is spamming high-level spells over and over without losing any mana. It's like she's cheating. The pressure is setting in. Vivi wants to help, but the problem is she's already used up every single catalyst Louis gave her, leaving her in a bad spot. She knows that even the most forbidden magic still needs a catalyst to function properly. Without one, she's stuck. She asks Louis if he's got anything left, but he tells her he gave her his very last one earlier. Louis explains that those crystals were made from the actual bodies of the spirits, because they knew mages would need the extra power. But since the spirits have been messed with, they don't have any more of those crystals to help them out right now. Vivi realizes he's right, and the look on her face says it all, they're officially out of options. Vivi looks completely stunned as she finally processes what Louis said. It clicks that the crystals were actually pieces of the spirits, and she realizes if that's the case, there's a much faster way to handle things. She tells the guys she's got a plan and stands tall in front of the massive shadow beast. Suddenly, Vivi just throws herself right at the dark monster. She dives straight into the swirling black energy, and as she disappears into the shadows, she tells the spirit to just stay still for a second while she works. Noah is watching from the back, totally confused. He asks what on earth she thinks she's doing. Cecilia sees what's happening and starts to lose it, shouting that there's absolutely no way this can be real. Vivi doesn't care though. She yells out that she's taking the spirit's body exactly as it is to use for herself, and explains that since the magic formula is just the caster's info, she can just use the spirit as her direct source, making the creature her brand new catalyst. A massive explosion of power starts to rip through the room. Cecilia is totally panicked now, asking Vivi if she's actually insane for trying to use a living spirit as a catalyst like that. Noah grips his sword tight and stares down the enemy. He's not backing off, yelling that he won't let anyone interfere with the plan. Someone calls out to him, but the Duke just tells them to stay back and leave everything to him while he gets right in the monster's face. He tells the beast he's the one it's fighting now, leaving Vivi looking totally freaked out as she watches the scene. Over in the shadows, Louis is struggling while a voice tells him to stop moving, and Vivi screams out for the kid, telling him he needs to get out of there because it's way too dangerous. But Louis just gives her a big smile and says he's doing fine. He's 100% sure Vivi will be the one to change him back, so he isn't scared at all. He tells himself it's okay because he remembers back when things first started going wrong. He was just a little kid crying alone in the woods, thinking about how his father and all the servants had completely lost it. A small spirit showed up right then, looking just as lost as him and asking if it was going to be alone forever, but the spirit stayed by his side. It told him everything was going to be fine, and they've been together ever since. Louis can't believe his eyes. The spirit stands right there, fully restored and glowing brighter than ever. Vivi is pumped, cheering about how the whole thing actually went perfectly. She watches as Louis reaches out to touch his friend, feeling relieved that the risky move worked out. The spirit isn't as thrilled, lecturing Louis about how using a spirit as a catalyst is crazy disrespectful. It warns him he could have vanished for good, leaving Louis looking pretty rattled, but Vivi just laughs it off, saying a little risk is expected with forbidden magic. She mentions she still needs a bit more help, while the spirit mutters about how every mage from Nemesis is just the worst. Across the way, the assassin woman is totally losing it. She's standing there shaking, wondering how her plan fell apart like this. She lets out a scream, realizing she's trapped and has nowhere left to run, which is when Vivi shows up with a scary look on her face. She tells the woman she's going to spill every single secret she's hiding. Vivi leans in with a creepy smile, asking how she should start the interrogation. Turns out she's got a bunch of new spells she's been dying to test out. The spirit watches Vivi's aggressive interrogation and notes that using that forbidden magic really stripped away all her restraint. Even Louis is standing back, looking totally freaked out by the whole thing while Lord Norman is on the floor groaning, which has Louis rushing over to check on his father, but the old man just sneaks a quick wink, looking like he's still got something up his sleeve. The assassin woman takes one look at the situation and realizes she's cornered, admitting to herself that the odds just aren't in her favor anymore, leading to her suddenly calling for a retreat. Vivi yells out in surprise as the woman starts to vanish right in front of them, leaving Noah standing there watching the escape. Vivi isn't about to let her slide that easily, screaming at the woman to wait right where she is. But the dark smoke keeps spreading as a voice warns them never to forget what happened here today. The woman glares at them one last time, pointing a finger and vowing she'll never forgive humans for stealing magic from her people. She's clearly not done with them yet, telling Vivi specifically that she's definitely coming back to find her again. Putting her pride as a demon on the line, she swears that she's going to make sure every last human is destroyed, which is the final thing she says before the shadows swallow her up, promising that when she returns, not a single person will be spared. Vivi and Noah stand in the middle of the hallway. The dark shadows from the demon's escape still hang in the air for a second before completely fading away. Vivi looks at the empty spot and says that he's gone, but Noah isn't ready to give up yet, asking her if she can track him down again like she did last time. Vivi drops down to the floor to check for a trail and tells him she's afraid she can't this time. She explains that the techniques that Guy used are way different from the ones they're used to. She's mostly just stuck thinking about how that demon knew exactly who she was. While she's trying to figure out what's going on, Louis yells out for his father. Vivi tells everyone they need to quit worrying about the escape and focus on the problem right in front of them, leading to a sudden realization about what might actually be happening in this house. Lord Norman finally speaks up while everyone stands around him, admitting that he was actually being manipulated the entire time. He looks at Noah and adds that the same thing goes for whatever happened to Noah's parents. And then he claims everything was really the fault of that man who couldn't stop that woman's rampage, a reveal that has Vivi looking totally shocked. Louis cuts his father off immediately, yelling that what he's saying isn't true, leaving Lord Norman standing there looking completely caught off guard as he says Louis's name. The kid stares him down, asking his father if he really thought he could keep everything hidden forever. Louis leans over the desk and tells him straight up that he knows his father did all of this on purpose, reaching into a desk drawer to grab something he's been keeping safe. He pulls out a document and holds it up, saying the date on it proves it's from that exact day. Vivi looks at the messy handwriting on the page and realizes what she's looking at while Noah checks the names. Louis explains that he's sure because he actually saw them writing the whole thing out. And as Noah points out the location on the map, Vivi asks if this is actually a murder contract. The little fire spirit shows up right then, adding that she saw the whole thing happen too. It goes back to how things used to be, with Norman remembering how he never sensed any kind of dark or twisted magic coming from anyone back then. But the group stands firm, telling Norman that he made his own choices and did all of this completely of his own free will. Norman just stands there gritting his teeth, looking totally backed into a corner while he starts talking about the past. He brings up Noah's father, mentioning how he was such a successful and talented older brother, at least compared to him. He looks bitter as he explains how his brother was the one who got to inherit everything from their father, and it all came down to talent. He says that because his brother was born with so much more natural ability, he was given a huge domain to rule, leaving Norman with nothing but a tiny, unimportant territory way out on the frontier. He looks back at those days and asks them straight up if they don't think the whole situation was just completely unfair. He gets this creepy look on his face, asking why the strong shouldn't be the ones actually ruling over the land. Noah just stares at him with total disgust, unable to believe his uncle caused all this pain and chaos for such a pathetic reason. Norman keeps going, explaining how he was busy trying to find a way to get rid of his own brother when a mysterious woman finally approached him. He admits he agreed to help her with a plan to completely wipe out the duchy, all just so he could get his hands on noble status. And looking back, he says he had no idea what to think when she just showed up out of thin air, especially since it turns out she wasn't even human. Since the whole thing was so convenient for his goals, he just decided to take the deal, and honestly, he didn't expect much from her at first. But he has to admit the results haven't been bad at all. The only real problem, he tells them, is the fact that Noah actually managed to survive. Noah just glares at him, looking completely done. With a smug look on his face, Norman straight up admits that he's the one who gave the orders for everything, and Vivi points out that he's being surprisingly honest now, though Norman just shrugs it off, saying there's no point in hiding it anymore since they're this deep. Noah tries to move but suddenly gets caught by a blast of power. He lets out a curse as he struggles against it, and Norman just watches, mentioning how glad he is that he learned some basic magic from that woman since it's actually coming in handy right now. Norman stands there with his arms wide open, acting like he's already won. He tells them that all the evidence is officially gone, leaving Noah standing there sweating and grit teeth, barely able to contain his anger while he asks Norman how he could do something like this. With a smug grin, Norman just mocks them, asking if they're actually trying to threaten him or if they really think they can take him in, and he closes his eyes with total confidence, stating that he has no intention of ever testifying against himself without any actual proof. But then his expression completely flips as his own voice suddenly rings out. He ends up admitting that he was the one who gave the order, and Norman starts to freak out, asking what's happening and looking horrified when he realizes that the voice everyone just heard was definitely his. A voice comes from a floating crystal nearby, casually mentioning that Norman's tendency to talk too much actually made this whole job pretty easy. Viola shows up with a satisfied smile, holding the crystal out and explaining that she's got a perfect recording of the entire ordeal, which prompts the small spirit she saved to chime in. It says it finally sees what she needed help with, even if it thinks all the mages here are trash. Viola thanks the little guy for the massive help, but the spirit just tells her to consider it even since she's the one who saved its life first. Norman starts panicking and yelling that the recording is totally invalid, but Noah just stands his ground and tells the guy to give it up already, while he gets right in Norman's face, saying he won't let him escape this time and he better get ready to answer for everything he's done. Norman completely loses his cool and falls back onto the floor, just stammering like an idiot because Viola turns to Noah and tells him he's got some nerve calling her scary when he's acting exactly the same way. The group notices Louis standing nearby. He looks pretty shaken by everything that just went down, and looking out the window, Louis remembers promising he'd do anything to help after they saved the spirit. Realizing that this is his responsibility now, it's not just something he can do, it's something he has to do. He admits to himself that deep down, he really wanted to believe that the woman was the only one behind all the mess. But the spirit chimes in, looking back on how this place used to be a rich land where spirits everywhere lived, way before it became some frontier territory. The spirit continues, explaining that people who can't see spirits just won't get it, even though this land is actually a great place. Suddenly, a group of maids and the butler come rushing down the hall, shouting out for Master Louis as they find him. Louis stops in his tracks, looking completely stunned to see everyone gathered there like that. One of the servants tells him they were totally shocked when they saw him just bolt out of his room for no reason. They start crowding around him, begging him not to do anything so reckless ever again because they were all so incredibly worried. So a maid leans in close, noticing the look on his face and asking what's wrong while the others just watch him. Louis asks if everyone actually knows who he is, and the staff member replies that of course they do. Tears start welling up in Louis's eyes as he looks at them, realizing that everyone has finally come back to their normal selves. Viola flashes a smile and gives him a little wink, explaining that the spell on everyone is broken and he's finally safe. And Louis wipes his face, sobbing as he thanks Vivienne for everything she's done to save them. The maids are totally losing it, asking what on earth just happened, but Louis just laughs and tells them it was nothing at all. So Viola looks over at Noah with a smile, telling him it looks like the kid is going to be just fine now. Noah just gives a quiet nod, and he admits that it feels like he's always getting bailaid out of these messes by Vivi lately. Viola just beams at him, saying she's honestly just happy her magic was actually useful to him for once. She gets all fired up, shouting that it's basically a mage's job to use their power for the sake of others, and naturally Noah stands there looking at her, simply mentioning how reliable she's become as she strikes a proud little pose. Noah holds up a dark crystal, explaining that if she brings up the magic from Nemes as evidence, they can finally prove his uncle is guilty of everything. Viola looks a bit down, saying she really wishes she could go and testify herself, but she's pretty sure no one is going to believe a word she says while she's in this tiny body. Noah looks down at her and says that's exactly why the next step is getting her back to her normal self. And just then Viola remembers something else, asking what happened to that ring the demon was talking about earlier. Noah reaches into his pocket, asking if she means the one he's got right there. Viola stares at the item, and a weird sense of recognition hits her. She's definitely seen this before. Noah looks at her and explains that he got the ring from a kid who saved his life during that incident, and they told him it would keep him safe. He mentions the kid had red hair and looked exactly like her, which makes Viola realize everything is starting to add up. The ring itself has the House of Viklund name carved right into the Nemes crest using their ancient language, proving its origin. Viola looks down at the ring in her hand, finally remembering that she was the one who gave it to him after all, because she suddenly remembers that they've actually met once before in the past. Flashing back to that day, a young Noah is collapsed on the ground, barely able to move or understand what just happened, so a young Viola spotted him and nervously walked over, trying to see if he was still conscious. She reached out and asked if he was okay, while Noah just looked up at her, his face all bruised and full of shock. As the memory plays out, she thinks about how only the people from the kingdom of Nemes have the power to use magic like that. In a flashback to the academy, the teacher stands at her podium and tells the students that the mages they want to become are the ones who protect people by mastering magic. And she adds that they need to study hard to protect themselves and their families when times get tough, which gets a hyped response from all the kids in the class. The teacher moves on to the day's lesson, announcing that they're going to be learning wind magic today, so she tells everyone to watch closely while she gives a demonstration. And as the teacher starts, a young Viola focuses intently on her notes. While the teacher explains the formulas and the catalysts needed for the spell, Viola starts connecting the dots and realizes she finally sees how it all fits together. Because at 10 years old, Viola is already starting to find sorcery way more interesting than basic magic. She loves that sorcery isn't just about being born with talent, but about the effort you put in, meaning anyone can use it if they work for it. Looking at the crystals and notes on her desk, she feels like the whole process of using formulas and catalysts makes it feel like a real art, but she can't help but think it's unfair that only the people in her country are allowed to use magic. She's convinced there are tons of people outside the kingdom of Nemes who have no idea how magic works, but would love to have the chance to try it. Young Viola decides she wants to pass on sorcery to all those people outside the kingdom, just so they can finally know what it's all about.